Hello there everyone and welcome back to Sure Scapegoat. In this video I'm going to be doing something that has been requested of me multiple times actually. I'm going to give you a reading guide, a basic communist reading guide for beginners. For those who have never studied socialism or communism, or those who are just new to the movement and haven't read any actual books on the subject. I'm going to split this into a couple of sections, right, because Marxism, obviously I'm basing this guide off of Marxism since I am an orthodox Marxist, but since Marxism is split into like different parts, like we have the philosophical part, the political part, and the economical part, I'm going to split this video into like different sections. So the first couple of books that I want to recommend are going to be a sort of introduction. So these books are quite short compared to the other ones, and they are quite simple to understand compared to the other ones. The first one that I honestly recommend that everyone watching this video go and read right now, because it's just an article and it's really short and it's really simple to understand, is Why Socialism by Albert Einstein. And yes, Albert Einstein was a physicist, not a politician, and he was aware of that, and that's like the first thing that he talks about. So just give it a read, like just read it. just read it. Like, it's short, it's easy to understand, just go read it. And I don't even have to talk about it anymore, just go read it. It talks about multiple things, but a bit about humanity. It talks about planned economy and the market and capitalism, and a bit how capitalism is inhumane and how humanity needs a planned economy in order to provide for all of humanity, in a sense. Just read it for yourself and you will see what it's about. The second, I won't call it a book because it's not a book. The second text is The Principles of Communism by Friedrich Engels. Friedrich Engels obviously was a lifelong friend of Karl Marx, and he kind of worked alongside Karl Marx, wrote a lot of the things together with Karl Marx, and after Karl Marx died, Engels wrote a number of works to kind of try to popularize Marx's writing, to rewrite it, to make it simpler, to condense it a bit, make it more understandable. And the Principles of Communism is one part of these efforts. The Principles of Communism is essentially an FAQ for communism. It has common questions and then a short answer and then a next question and then an answer, and it is that kind of format. It is like an FAQ, right? Like you would find on a website or something. So that one is very good for beginners. Not a lot of heavy reading involved in that, so that you're not losing anything while reading it, is what I'm saying. Like, you'll lose a little bit of time. It will take you like half an hour max to read it. The third text, which is actually a book that I want to recommend for beginners, is a book by Vladimir Lenin, actually, called The Three Sources and Three Component Parts of Marxism, in which Lenin talks about the different parts of Marxism, English political economy, German philosophy, and French socialism, and kind of why there are three parts of Marxism and what they all do, and how they came to be, why they are important, and that kind of thing. And it is by those lines, philosophy, economy, and politics, that I have split this video into different sections for different books. So that's kind of why I wanted to include that book. Now, the first section of books is the philosophy section. And some people will kind of raise an eyebrow at this, but the first book I'm going to recommend is actually a book by Mao Zedong. Now, not everyone likes Mao. Quite a lot of people outright dislike him. Some people love him. Regardless of what you think of Mao, his book on Contradiction is genuinely very good at explaining Marxist philosophy. On Contradiction was written by Mao for soldiers in the army of the Chinese Soviet Republic. And so it's not written in this kind of academic language that a lot of these other books are written in, and it's easier to understand for just the average Joe. And so even though it's by Mao and I'm not a Maoist and like I have disagreements with Mao, I still want to recommend this book because I've read it like numerous times and I think that it is genuinely good at explaining Marxist philosophy, regardless of what you think of Mao, what he did, what the other things he wrote. On Contradiction, I think, genuinely is a good introduction to Marxist philosophy. And another really good introduction to Marxist philosophy is a book by Friedrich Engels called Socialism, Utopian and Scientific. And essentially what that book does is it critiques a lot of socialists who were around back then and suggests improvements to the socialist movement and explains what Marxism is, what scientific socialism is, and how a political movement can use the scientific method to improve itself. The next book I want to recommend is not actually an entire book, it's just the first chapter of a book, and it's the first chapter of The German Ideology, co-written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Now, The German Ideology is quite a thick book, it's quite long and quite hard to understand, so I think the first chapter is enough for beginners. If you want to get into it, then read the entire thing, but if you're new to Marxism and you just want to understand Marxist philosophy, then the first chapter will do fine. In fact, Marx wrote a lot of books in which you are fine just reading the first chapter if you are just a beginner and you just want the summarized version. And if you want the entire story, then you read the entire thing, right? It's the same with the first chapter of Capital, which is Marx, like the largest, most famous book series, right? If you are new to Marxist economy, you're fine reading the first chapter of Capital. And just like that, you are fine reading the first chapter of the German Ideology if you're new to Marxist philosophy. So that's why I'm just recommending the first chapter, but if you want to understand Marxist philosophy more thoroughly, then just read as much as you want, really. Like, you can read the entire thing, you can read half of it, read 2 chapters, read as much as you feel like. Moving on to Marxist Economy for beginners, we have 2 books that kind of go hand in hand that, in my opinion, are better for starting off than the Communist Manifesto, and those are Value, Price and Profit and Wage, Labor and Capital, both by Karl Marx. These are almost pamphlets, like they're incredibly short and thin, and they were not written for academics. They were written entirely for the average worker. So it's very easy to understand, it's very short, and it was written by Karl Marx himself. So those 2 are good books, and you should read them. Next, like I mentioned earlier, is the first chapter of Capital. The first chapter of the first volume of Capital. Obviously, Karl Marx wrote 3 volumes of Capital. He planned to write a 4th one, but he died before he could, and so Friedrich Engels kind of picked that up and sort of took what Marx had written of the 4th volume and he wrote like a number of different texts out of that. But yes, there are 3 volumes of Capital. The first volume is probably the most important, but if you are completely new and you don't feel like sitting down and reading that entire brick of a book, then read the first chapter and you will have a basic understanding of Marx's critique of political economy. The next book that I want to recommend is another one by Vladimir Lenin, the second one by Lenin on this list, but it is called Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. And as the title might suggest, it explains how and why capitalism and the international bourgeois class turns imperialistic in hunt for profit, and we kind of see an explanation for why things like the United States going after the Native Americans, Native American lands, as well as the slavery in America, and obviously this hasn't happened yet, but in recent years we've seen America go after Libya and Iraq and Afghanistan in order to go after oil and natural resources, and also a lot of South American countries, a number of African countries and Caribbean islands. Really just a host of nations have been invaded by the United States in recent years. And Lenin kind of makes an attempt to explain why this happens and why empires, German and British and French empires in the past have invaded other countries in order to get money. Like, why does that happen under capitalism, and what's the purpose of it, and how can it be stopped, essentially. And it also explains how imperialism is inevitable if you have capitalism as your system, right? As long as capitalism exists, you will eventually get to imperialism, and countries will eventually start invading each other for profit. That's the basic idea of the book. Moving on to Marxist politics, we have the Paris Commune, which not a lot of people, I don't see a lot of people talking about it, but I think it is one of the most important things that Marx ever wrote. It's not that long and it's not that complicated, so again, this is another one of those things that you should just go read for yourself. Rather than me trying to explain it to you, I think you are better off just reading it and going into it blind. I don't know, I think it just has more of an impact then. And then of course we have the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. This is arguably Marx's most famous book. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the Communist Manifesto because I think it doesn't deserve that #1 most famous book by Marx spot. I think a lot of other books that Marx has written deserve to be more famous and deserve to be read more than the Communist Manifesto. But yes, the Communist Manifesto, it attempts to explain historical materialism, class conflict, as well as a bit of when and why capitalism came into existence, why capitalism had to overthrow feudalism, right? We had, like with the French Revolution, how the Industrial Revolution played into it, different things that capitalism's done well, and then critiques of capitalism and why socialism and communism would be a better system, and that kind of thing. And then it kind of just rambles on for a bit and kind of talks about nothing. I don't know, like it feels like half of the Communist Manifesto doesn't really say anything. I don't know, like I've read that book I think 10 times, and it just every time it feels like a large chunk of it is just completely meaningless. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people like the Communist Manifesto and hold it very highly and very dearly, so I guess it goes on the list. And it is also the most read work by Karl Marx ever, and so, I don't know, maybe there's something in there that I haven't quite caught, but yeah. The next book is What is to be Done by Lenin, and the book talks about, well, obviously what the title suggests, it talks about what needs to be done in order for there to be a revolution in Russia. And Lenin kind of argues against the idea of spontaneous revolution. People like Rosa Luxemburg were very into spontaneous revolution and supporting workers whenever they by themselves independently rose up, and then Marxists would kind of lead them in a socialist direction. Lenin argued that workers won't just spontaneously rise up, and that there is a need for a vanguard party, and a vanguard party being a kind of a dedicated group of revolutionary Marxists, and they would spread ideas of socialism and communism among the workers and kind of urge them to rise up, rather than having the revolutionaries just sit there and wait for the workers to rise up. So that's what is to be done. Quite an early work by Lenin, 16 years before the Russian Revolution, but still, I think, a good book. The next book is yet another one by Lenin, and I'm kind of realizing now that I have quite a lot of Lenin on this list, but that's mostly because I've read a lot of Lenin, and I like Lenin a lot. Even though I'm not like, you know, I don't call myself a Leninist, I still like a lot of Lenin's ideas. But The State and Revolution by Lenin, it obviously talks about the state, and it talks about what should happen to the state after a socialist revolution. And it's a bit of a critique of anarchism, not entirely, but it does have some critiques of anarchism and the ideas of wanted to abolish the state directly, like abolishing the state as soon as there's a socialist revolution. Lenin kind of talks about why the state exists in the first place, what the purpose of the state is, the state having a monopoly on violence, and whether or not the state can be used to further the goals of the working class. So Lenin kind of argues from the point that the state is a tool, it's a weapon, it has a monopoly on violence, police and military, and if the working class are to overthrow the bourgeois class and have a socialist revolution, then they can use the state to defend their nation. They can use the military, turn it into a socialist military, and use it to defend against outside forces like the United States, who pretty much invade every country that tries to establish socialism. And they can use the police to defend the state, the newly established socialist state, against counter-revolutionaries and fascists and those kind of people who would want to have a counter-revolution and bring down the state again, and have an endless circle of revolutions always overthrowing each other. And it just goes into detail about why the proletariat should seize the state and how it can be used to further the interests of the working class rather than furthering the interest of the bourgeois class. The next book that I want to recommend is not actually doesn't actually fit into any of these categories. Rather, it goes over each one of them. So that's AntiDuring by Friedrich Engels, and it has 3 different parts. They actually go over philosophy, economy, and politics. So I didn't put this in any of the sections because it talks about the 3 different sections in and of itself. So it's kind of a meta, right? So AntiDuring by Friedrich Engels, I think is very good. It not really an introduction. It's quite thick, but if you like reading books and if you have the time, then AntiDuring, you should definitely give it a read. So that is my reading list for beginners. Let me know if you have read any of these books in the comments down below. Let me know if there was a book that I missed out on. Like if you have any books that you want to recommend to other viewers, then you can leave a comment in the comment section down below and tell other people about what book you think that beginners to socialism should read. All of the links to all of these books and all of the names and everything are in the description down below. So go check them out. Again, first thing everyone on this video should go and read is Why Socialism by Albert Einstein. It is actually very good. It's surprisingly good. I didn't think it was going to be that good. I thought people were just sharing it because it was written by Einstein, you know, oh, isn't it cool that Einstein wrote this? But no, it is actually a very good article. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.
Shall we still be slaves and work for wages? It is outrageous, has been for ages. Oh, this earth by right belongs to toilers and not to spoilers of liberty. The master class is small, but they have lots of gall. When we unite to gain our right, if they resist, we'll use our might. There is no middle ground. This fight must be won round to victory for liberty. Our class is marching on.